Aloha. I do not go live very often, but I think I'm going to change that. I thought, being that it's Thanksgiving, it would be like a good day to do an update, and since my phone is having crazy memory issues, it's kind of hard to film a video and put an update on, and I think it would be a good opportunity for me to get more comfortable with being in the present moment and speaking in the present and sharing things in the present, because it's a gift and we should be thankful. One thing I like to say first is, I would like to honor the fact that this is a day that for many people is pretty traumatic and triggering. Looking at indigenous people and like the generational trauma that comes with this day, and the fact that, to this day it's still not widely known the true story of Thanksgiving, and the fact that you had indigenous helping settlers and then the settlers turning around and slaughtering indigenous people. So this is a day that holds a lot of weight for a lot of people for that reason culturally. And then it's another day where, we're told to be grateful and thankful for the things we have. And there are a lot of people who might find this day to be kind of a slap in the face, those who have nothing. But even they find things to be grateful for. But the thing is, that's something we should try to do every day. Because it gives us more options. Simply put, it gives us more options. Like if you can, it's kind of like this. It's like this, right? You can be a moron, or you can be more on. More options. You can break it down into its parts and observe it and dissect it and see, like, how can I find this useful? So taking the moron example, I could say I'm a moron, or I could say I'm more on, depending on how I care to observe that. And so I've found over the last few years there's been this really interesting thing where this time of year comes around and they'll often carry with it a large amount of chaotic energy, like unexplainable, bizarre, tower moment shit happening in my life and the lives of others, to the point where I've noticed a few times almost like this sense of kind of like this inside joke about it, where it's like, and the holidays also, it becomes known as being a day that's insanely, or a time of year that's insanely depressing for people. And it can be, if you aren't able to flip things and look at the good in situations and all that, it becomes really easy to get stuck in like a victim mode and limit your options. So today's kind of a weird anniversary for me, because a year ago, last Thanksgiving Day, I found myself walking down Mount Haleakala after driving up the night before and having the power steering go out on my car. And I was like not more than 3 miles away from Hosmer Grove at the time, maybe 2. I don't know, it's hard to say, it's a mountain. But, so I thought the best option would be to limp my car up to the campground for a couple of reasons. A, it seemed easier going uphill with no power steering than going downhill with no power steering, because like gravity and stuff. And B, there's cameras. There's a gate going up that section of the mountain, and it's right before the campground. I had been dealing with what appeared to be people following me in the days leading up to that, and quite honestly probably for years if I'm really looking at it, because that car, so there was a power steering issue that went out that night, but I was also dealing with the fact that that key fob on that car would lock and unlock itself. Not just that car, but the car I had before it too. And then both cars too, I would find screws in the tire, and it would always be near the wheel well where you couldn't take the screw out without replacing the tire. You wouldn't be able to patch the tire. And this happened 2 different vehicles I had. And it's also been the case of the houses I lived in here in Maui, especially, I would find break-in attempts. The screen would be pried off my bathroom window, or like whatever window that was easiest to access the house. I would notice the screen pried up in the corner. And there was one instance in the house I lived in Lahaina where I actually saw the person. I could see his silhouette in the window, and I had a friend staying with me at the time, and we were both really freaked out by it. But he had actually piled flagstones up under the window over the course of the night. I saw the motion detector light. I thought it was the landlord's dogs, and then the next morning I saw it wasn't. And then after I moved out of that house, the house I lived in Kahului, I came home to find a crack in the patio door, and the same thing with the screen on the bathroom window there. And so, like, there's been a pattern of this kind of weirdness. And the other pattern that there's been is that I've been kind of following certain things in the media on a bigger scale and smaller scales, and seeing patterns. And over the last year, I've been seeing things in a way that might be allowing me to put pieces together for longer patterns over the years. What happened is I was doing a guest spot here in Maui a year ago, and I ended up driving around to all of these different places, and I was just kind of, while I was driving in my car, vocalizing observations I had made about things. And what I was looking at was like, so the issue that's come up out here has been like the issue of like trafficking, human trafficking, child trafficking. In 2020, it came to my attention because there were protests happening on Big Island about child trafficking, and that's also when I found out about like Pizzagate stuff and all of that. And so that was in the media, and there were things going on about that, and I had noticed certain things and been told certain things that compelled me to actually want to go to authorities about it. I went to the police, and I found it really weird because I wouldn't get very far before I felt like they were really kind of shooing me out the door, didn't want to hear anymore. Or I would leave messages with them, like they'd tell me to call Vice, I'd do that, and leave messages and get no call back. Or when I did reach someone, kind of get the runaround on the phone, to the point where at one point I thought they might have been impersonating one officer I had talked to in person when I tried to follow up with information. So after this happened, this is 2020, I called the FBI, and they took my information and they took my story and then said they'd pass it along to their field agents. I didn't really hear anything further on that. And then, but it wasn't long after that, in that same realm of time, I ended up finding myself in a really weird car accident that also happened to involve county vehicles, like a county dump truck. And long story short, what happened there is I was crossing an intersection. They were waving me forward like I was clear to go, and I was not, and I ended up getting T-boned by this big white pickup truck. That inspired me going back to the mainland and having some really weird experiences there. Coming back to Oahu, really weird experiences, to the point where I've been like slandered online, lied about, like gaslit in numerous shops and stuff. It's just bizarre shit. They're calling me a Karen and all this. They're taking texts and stuff and sharing partial of what they said, and they're like downright lying at times about things. So really, this bizarre shit's been going on for a while. And then I end up in Maui. I'm working in Lahaina for a little while, and then make my way to Wailuku, working at Queen of Hearts. You have the Lahaina fires, there's all the things that are tied with that. And the Lahaina fire, when that happened, this August 8th, 2023, at that point in time, I'm guest spotting at in Big Island and Maui, so I'm kind of splitting my time up between Big Island and Maui. And so on the 3rd of August, I was parked at Mount Haleakala Harbor. I was car camping for that year. When I got to Maui, for the most part, I was homeless the whole time I lived there. I was living out of my car. So I'd often park at Mount Haleakala Harbor. So I'm parked there on the 3rd, and I was scheduled to fly out back to Big Island that morning at 6 o'clock. I got woke up at 4 in the morning to sirens because there were boats on fire at Mount Haleakala Harbor, and so the sirens and the fire trucks there woke me up. I would have probably missed my flight had it not been for that. I get to work, and I'm telling my coworker about this, that she's, just as synchronicity would have it, she's telling me about how on her drive into work she was listening to a podcast, and the podcast was covering a paranormal thing that had happened where this ghost allegedly set this building on fire. So they're filming this podcast, and suddenly their studio sets on fire. So she's listening to that story. Well, I had this experience that morning, and then 5 days later there's the lahaina fire, and then I'm noticing weird shit with that. Like, the year previous to that, just about a year, is shortly after I left Skin Factory, but I was going through Lahaina, and I noticed that the fire hydrant on Lahaina Luna, somebody had ran into it. And I didn't really think much of it at the time, beyond like, oh, that's weird. Fast forward 6 months at the most, maybe, and there is a car that runs into the fire hydrant right outside of the shop in Wailuku, Queen of Hearts, where I was working at the time. And same thing. And then after the fire, I'm back, it's the 12th, I believe, I'm noticing that they're doing like work on the ground under, and I don't know, that it's all probably coincidence. I was thinking of it though because I just saw another post where somebody ran into a fire hydrant in Oahu, and it's apparently one that gets hit a lot. But maybe we could do something about the fire hydrants, I don't know. But it was just a weird thing because the fire hydrant in Lahaina that failed was quite possibly that same fire hydrant, because there was a fire hydrant on Lahaina Luna that failed, and that fire hydrant on the one I saw in Lahaina was on that street, down the shop a few blocks from the front street, or down Front Street a few blocks, down like a couple of streets from the shop I used to work at. So I used to work at the Skin Factory, which was on Lahaina, Lahaina Luna. So I don't know, I just noticed a lot of bizarre kind of things like that over the years. And then a year ago today, the whole Haleakala thing, and then the things that have happened in that year since. And there seem to be reoccurring patterns with some of it. And in some ways I almost feel like the universe is guiding me toward places that seem to have similar things happening in them. And I don't know how comfortable I am talking about it because of how uncomfortable it seems to have made, like, authority figures when I've tried to approach it. Because, like I mentioned, so there was the 2020 shit where I went to authorities. Then again, this year, I was staying at one place, and, you know, it could be coincidence, it could be nothing, but I found what looked like could have been human remains, possibly fossilized. It's hard to say. I took it to the police station in Hilo, and I also called the police in Pahoa, and there were other things happening in tandem with that. What I would say, so the police in Hilo wanted nothing to do with it. They were like, I don't know what to do with it, throw it away, I don't want that. I'm like, well, you guys are like the ones who would know where to go with this, what to do with it. I don't know what to do with this. You would know this better than I would, so don't you think you would, like, maybe at least give me some guidance? And he's just like, throw it away. So I just threw it away in the trash can at the Hilo police station. what could have just been a rock. It could have been like a skull with part of the neck fragment. It could have been one of those things they use for like pounding koi. And I found it in the corner of the cabin I was renting at the time, this place down in Kalapana. And at the time, I was doing a gardening thing and found a bowling ball in the garden wall. And I moved the bowling ball and found a small lava tube. And so I'm noticing that the rock on the tube is really crumbly. And the rocks, the boulders that are making up the wall of the garden bed are really heavy, dense rocks. I pulled those all off of there, and I start pulling out these rocks, and I'm an artist. I'm a tattoo artist. I've been working in tattoo shops nearly 20 years now. So I've been surrounded with, like, the darker aspect of life, skulls and shit for a long time, and anatomical charts and shit like that. And so I would keep seeing, like, you know, and maybe I'm just insane too, but like a lot of the rocks I would pull out seem to have just a similar kind of shape to them, which could really like inspire the imagination in a weird way. And for the most part, I let it go because I'm like, I think I listen to too much metal, and I'm a tattoo artist. All right, and until I found this one spot that not only was it this strangely shaped rock with like this thing sticking out of it, but then there was like these other rocks that all looked like could very easily have been like vertebrae of the spine. Maybe they were like petrified or something. I wonder about the chemical composition of the rocks out here, and you know, like, also with that being a very rain heavy area too, like in the past what kind of things could have happened, and maybe could explain like something like that. And at any rate, I took photos of this stuff. I called the Pahoa Police Department. I had met them out by the Painted Church. I had some of the things with me at the time too. I had an object that was given to me that I felt could be very dangerous, and I told the police about it, and they didn't want anything to do with it. And I was like, don't you think, if what I think is true with this, that the responsible thing would be for you guys to do something with this? And it was the same, like, shutdown situation. So both instances that I went to them, and then I had a number of other things unfold. I don't want to sit here like telling like the whole year of this like on live or anything, because I am trying to get to a point here, but I think some of that illustrates it pretty well. I've been dealing with some bizarre shit over the last year, and so I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. And one thing I wish I would have done a little differently over this last year has been more in the moment in terms of sharing things as they come up. I feel hesitation for doing that for various reasons. One is because sometimes I'm not camera ready. I'm 39, I'm going on to 40. I'm kind of I don't want to say a shit show most of the time, but a bit. You know, but at the same time, I think I'm very hard on myself given what I'm dealing with. So it's like, I wish I would have been more diligent and or able to film and share things like live in the moment as things were happening, because well, there were a lot of things that I really just kind of like feel really big in ways like really like what the fuck, what could I even possibly think about doing about any of this, you know, that kind of feeling. At the same time, I've had moments that felt deeply spiritual and guided, and I also look at the fact that I'm not dead yet, and I think there's probably something to be found within that. And I feel like it's all important in one way or another. There's this book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, where he says he kind of finally comes to his realization, and that is that nothing is trivial and everything is sacred. And all those moments have a sacred aspect to them, even if it's just like puzzle pieces in terms of maybe for my future self reviewing and being like, oh yeah, or maybe other people. I hesitate to, make broad blanket statements and stuff, especially when it comes to like prophetic shit, because we've been doing this like the whole time we've existed, but even that you can take to another level. But I do feel like very strongly that one way or another we're in very interesting times right now, where there just seems to be a lot of action, so to speak, a lot of things happening, a lot of things being uncovered. Like the biblical apocalypse and all that is just unveiling. So, and I don't want to get too biblical with it, although I think it's valuable to incorporate something that has influenced society, if only to understand it. Whether or not you want to embody the values in there depends on what resonates. I think there's good things to be found within religion, but I think there's also a lot of brainwashing and bullshit worked in there, because people who want power really don't care how they go about getting it, It's like, over the last year, it feels like it's been a combination of 3D weird things that feels sort of like some kind of like crime thriller, and spiritual things that feel sort of like semi-apocalyptic, fucking mystical and magic, in the sense that reality seems way more fucking malleable than it used to. But there's also the sense that it's probably always been that way, and there's just our ability to perceive it and the mechanisms of that maybe we've been lied to about, and it's actually really simple. And I think that goes back to the animism thing. Animism is the belief that everything is one, everything is connected, everything is conscious. And I think there's this interesting link as we're moving more into AI and quantum computing and all that, where we seem to be going into like techno-animism, or an animism, and it's sort of like another expression of that consciousness evolving with AI. If the AI were to become conscious, and it probably already is, because it's tuned into that deeper programming. It's all one. It's like boing, boing, boing. That kind of reminds me of this little download I had this morning, and that kind of brings me back into a segue of something I wanted to talk about, is wishing I had been more diligent about sharing stuff in the moment. That being said, there is a lot of stuff I've documented that I think is worth sharing in a responsible way, in a safe way, like, I am not interested in gossipy bullshit like that, or anything of that regard. I'm kind of more spiritually influenced, but I also feel that just having a greater ability to feel comfortable sharing my day-to-day experience could be helpful in the future in terms of like puzzle pieces. And not in a way that's intrusive and shit, but just being honest about where I am at too, because I also deal with a lot of my own insecurities and neurodivergence and head injuries. And and it can be a lot sometimes, but I think part of managing that is accepting it and just trying to move through it rather than hide it, because I think that's something that's fucked me up a lot over the years is I'm a little bit weird. It gets heightened when I'm anxious or nervous, so then I'm a little weirder until I'm able to kind of acclimate to my surroundings. And if people don't know this about me and know my background, then it could probably come off as a bit disconcerting. And I think that's something I need to be more mindful of. And that's simply by really giving myself more grace to just be myself. Because that leads to more understanding, I think of times in the past, like where I definitely was like self-sabotaging by being afraid. Whereas if I would have just probably been more out there from the get-go, probably could have saved myself a lot of bullshit. But I'm really good at overanalyzing and overthinking shit. But I recently had an experience, I've had all these weird things happen in my life, and I've recently had this reoccurring experience where there'll be this energy, it will usually manifest as an older guy, like 60s, 70s, who